Okay, I think we'll get the ball rolling. I think just about 5 past now. So okay, couple of bits of housekeeping. You may have heard there we're going to be recording this, so just if anybody objects to that, they don't have to participate, or you can turn your screen off or whatever. So the idea, I'm going to mute everybody during the talk, and then unmute everybody at the end. So if people want to put forward questions and things, you can use the little chat box on the bottom of the screen, and we can address those at the end. Or as I say, I'll unmute everybody at the end, so we can have a chat as needed. So I just want to mention as well, there's well, Reggie's going to give a talk next Saturday at 5. And we also have the soda dinner coming up, and the tickets are available for that on the website. So there will be a cutoff on that. So I'd encourage everybody who hasn't bought to get the tickets bought and get that organised. So without further ado, I'll go over to Vincent, who is giving the talk this evening on the Dublin, Dunleary and Kingstown yacht clubs. So over to you, Vincent.
Hey, thanks very much, Will. So can everybody see the screen there?
Okay, you might lose yourself for a second here when I mute. You might have to unmute. Yeah, you'll have to unmute yourself, Vincent, there.
Okay, no, that's good now. Okay, we presume everybody can hear me now. Good evening, everybody, and thanks very much for letting me talk to you tonight. Tonight's talk will focus on some early yachting in Dublin Bay, when the yachts were moored at Ringsend, and later in Dunleary and Kingstown. I'll describe the clubs, where they were located, who were the flag officers, and in some instances there's substantial evidence relating to some of these clubs, and in other cases very little documentation has been found as yet. As many of the races involved only a small number of yachts, I won't be looking in depth at their aquatic activities. So here we have a 1799 print of the original Dunleary pier, which was completed in 1767 as a commercial pier for coastal freighters and fishermen. That pier enclosed Old Dunleary Harbour, which survives opposite the Motor Yacht Club. The inner harbour at Dunleary was much larger in the 18th and 19th century than it is today, due to the fact that the harbour was annexed by the railway company when they relocated the terminus of the Western Row line from Salt Hill to create a new terminus at the Royal Harbour in Kingstown in 1837. So if you look at the map there, you'll see there's a note which is hard to read, which actually says end of present line. It's just underneath the words Old Harbour. So that's where the line actually went to. And then the line beyond that to the right is actually a proposed railway line taking you up to where the Dunleary station is today. The construction of the Royal Harbour started in 31st of May 1817. Initially, it was planned only to build one pier, just like Holyhead Harbour, but a decision by the Harbour Commissioners of 1820 concluded that a second pier was required to prevent a build-up of sand within the harbour area. By 1822, the East Pier was completed and a temporary lighthouse erected. The harbour construction, including the West Pier and lighthouse, was not completed until 1842. In 1821, King George visited Ireland. He arrived at Howth, but departed by the steamship the Lightning from Dunleary, which village and harbour he renamed as Kingstown, in the knowledge that when the Royal Harbour was completed, that the village was likely to grow into a fine town. Now that we've seen the context, let's take a look at some of the attempts to found a successful yacht club. There are records for the Dunleary Sailing Club, which existed here about 1820. The records are pretty fragmentary and unreliable. But that such a club existed, however, is beyond all reasonable doubt. And you can see a couple of yachts there on the left of the picture. So they could be leisure yachts or they could be small fishing boats. We're not quite sure. The Commodore was known as the Pirate Chief, and the yachts of the club were known as the Pig Bank Fleet. The club did not last for very long, but may have led to the foundation in the 1840s of the Hibernian Yacht Club, which we'll be looking at later. We don't know how many club members there were. There may have been as few as 4 or 5 yacht owners. Following the collapse of Alexander's Bank in Sackville Street, the building that they had previously occupied at number 15 Sackville Street was taken over by the Royal Irish Yacht Club, which had been founded at a meeting in the Gresham Hotel in 1831. Okay, we could come back to it. So if you look at the middle picture, you can see number 15 there in the middle, which is the more decorative looking house, and that's the house that they operated out of. So that club had been founded in the Gresham Hotel in 1831. Now, the Royal Irish Yacht Club, that is not the present club, but it's another club of the same name. And if you look at the names of some of the members there, there's a William Minchin, who would have been a member of Lochderg Yacht Club. Just above his name, there's John Jemison, Esquire. So that would be the son of the guy who founded the whiskey distillery. And there's Mr. Hutchinson down at the bottom left, who may well have ended up being the harbour master. The Commodore of that club was Henry William Paget, who attended Christ Church College, Oxford, and left with an MA degree in 1786, aged 18, and then undertook a grand tour. On his return to the United Kingdom, he joined the army. He married Lady Caroline Elizabeth Villiers in 1795, but they were divorced in 1810, probably as a result of his seduction of an affair with Lady Caroline Cadogan, who just happened to be whose husband just happened to be the brother of the Prime Minister. Lady Caroline Cadogan had 4 children. And as a result of the affair, Charlotte's brother, Captain Cadogan, challenged Paget to a duel, which he actually survived. Charlotte's husband sued Henry Paget for criminal conversation and won the case. And Paget was forced to pay him £24,000 in compensation. That £24,000 at that time would be about £2.3 million in today's money. He was in charge of the cavalry and horse under the Duke of Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, but when hit by a shell in the final hours of battle, he lost his right leg. He was created first Marquess of Anglesey for his contribution to the success of the battle. This is Place Newid, his Anglesey home. He was appointed Privy Councillor in 1827 and was appointed Lord Lieutenant of Ireland in 1828, the highest administrative post in Ireland following the Act of Union of 1801. During his time in Ireland, he campaigned for Catholic emancipation. Paget owned a 113-ton cutter called the Pearl, which had been built in Essex, and he was appointed the Commodore of the Royal Irish Yacht Club in 1828. His Vice Commodore was the George Augustus Chichester, 2nd Marquess of Donegal, MP for Carrickfergus. When you look at him in the picture there, he looks like a fine gentleman, but he ended up in a debtor's prison due to his gambling debts. And he was released from prison in 1795 on condition that he married the illegitimate daughter of the moneylender who paid off his debts. But the marriage was found to be invalid in 1815, and their children were all found to be illegitimate because the bride was underage. In 1799, he succeeded the 7th Baron Chichester of Belfast and thus inherited 250,000 acres of Antrim and Donegal, including the entire city of Belfast. His residence was Ormeau House in Belfast. He was appointed to Privy Councillor of Ireland in 1803. With his income, he should have been a very rich man, but in 1844 he died with debts of £400,000. In Protestant Dublin society, as Dublin was in the early part of the 19th century, a royal or noble commodore or vice commodore were absolutely necessary for any successful club. The Royal Irish Yacht Club rules and regulations were just like the rules of any gentleman's club. Any intending members had to be proposed by a member of the club who was responsible for the entry fees. The existing membership could object to any potential member. Members of the Army and the Navy are automatically made honorary members, but they do not have a vote. Subscriptions were payable on the 1st of January every year. There was a 5-guinea entry fee and 3 guineas annual subscription. If your subscription was not paid by the 1st of February, you would be removed from the membership list. Anybody leaving must pay his subscription for the whole of that year, but that didn't apply to people who were not resident in Ireland. The club was run by a commodore, a vice commodore, and a committee of 17, and 2 honorary secretaries. 3 of the 17 committee members must be present to form a quorum. Yearly accounts must be produced on the first Tuesday in February, and all payments be signed by 3 committee members.
Can I get a peppermint tea, please? Thanks a million.
Was there any mention of women members? No, because it was assumed that women would not want to join the women's club. Every club needs a burgee and an ensign, which the members can fly from their yachts. This burgee shows the Irish harp and the royal crown. And the ensign of the club, from October 1831, which had become a Royal Irish Yacht Club, along with the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes and the Royal Western Yacht Club of Ireland, they were entitled to fly a white ensign. On the top left canter, we have the Union flag, incorporating the flags of St. George, St. Patrick, and St. Andrew. And St. George's cross is repeated in the middle of the flag. In the centre, we have a crest featuring the Irish harp, symbolising Ireland. It is surmounted by the British crown, indicating that Ireland lies under the authority of the crown. Above that is a triple tower, from the portal of which a heart is springing argent and hoofed. The tower symbolised grandeur and solidity, and the heart or stag symbolised peace and harmony within the tower. I've made a suggestion as to what the colours were, which would have appeared on the ensign, and the harp there would have been in gold originally. As there were no standardised rules for yachting matches, each yachting match had its own, whoever set up the match set up the rules for the match. However, they did have rules for rowing matches. Gigs were used for rowing matches to have 4 or 6 oars. The gigs to be pulled by gentlemen, 2 of which must be members of this club. Every gig to be entered in the name of its owner, and 1 guinea per oar was always to be the entry fee. And a minimum of 3 gigs per race. Each challenge cup to become the property of a member, winning it 2 years in succession. And the owner of any gig which collides with another cannot win a prize and must pay for the damage occurred. So in this picture here, you see some gigs. They're relatively small. I mean, some of the gigs would have been quite a lot bigger than that if they had 6 oars. Now, what kind of yachts did they sail in? I hesitate to use the word race. In those early days, most of the yachts were relatively small, between 4 and 8 tons. They were Danzig in style. and many of them had been constructed in the Persian ports of the Baltic. All were built using the best quality oak, clinch built and very strong, although put together using wooden pegs. The stern was generally round, but once in Ireland, many of the boats were modified with the addition of additional keels, and half decks were often added. The larger boats had a cutter rig, and the smaller ones just as mainsail and foresail. The larger boats were in the style of a Kinsale hooker, which you can see here in this image. Over time, some of the boats converted from the cutter rig, which required a lot of manpower, to the simpler Irish wherry rig. And the Irish wherry rig would have had two mainsails. This boat is just at anchor, so he's dropped one of his mainsails. Some of the cutter rigged yachts used topmasts carrying four-sided topsails without a topsail gaff. When races did take place, until at least the first Dublin Regatta of 1828, the prizes were generally not silverware, but a leg of mutton or something like that. Incidentally, you may well be aware of the famous yacht America was rigged similar to an Irish wherry when she won the America's Cup in 1851. The Scotsman newspaper reported on the first Dublin Regatta of 1828, which started on the 21st of July, with a sailing match for yachts not exceeding 75 tons for a prize worth £75, which would be somewhere about £5,000 sterling in today's money. The competitors were Thetis, Ganymede, Liberty, Ruby, and Emerald Isle. On Tuesday of the regatta, the prize was worth £50 for yachts not exceeding 60 tons. The Thetis lost her topmast in that race, which was won by Liberty. And the image you see in front of you here shows Liberty on the right, just having come through the finishing line. The second race consisted of Elizabeth of Greenock, Betsy from Bangor, Sally from Dublin, Ariel from Belfast, Alarm from Cork, and Giacour from Cork. I can tell you a little bit more about that race in a moment. On Thursday, Betsy won the £30 trophy because the collision which had occurred between Betsy and Elizabeth was on larboard at the time and was thus obliged to give up the contest. On Friday, the races were for fishing boats with prizes of £100 presented by the Lord Lieutenant. In the rowing races for gentlemen, the Belfast 4-oar gig beat the Dublin gig. The regatta was organised by William Carr, 19th Lord Hay, who was also the 18th Lord Errol, who competed himself in the yacht Liberty. In that race, in the picture, you can see what is described at the time as a sad caricature of Lord Anglesey's yacht, the Pearl. And there you can see on the left, you can see Lord Anglesey waving to the crowds ashore. The flagships were the Royal Navy's Royal Charlotte, which was put at the pleasure of the Lord Lieutenant, and Tiger at the other end of the line was a revenue cutter. What you might have missed in this image is a tiny 6-foot long yacht astern of the Pearl. So in the middle of the picture, you can see the tiny yacht, and I've blown it up there on the right. It was owned by a crippled gentleman, Mr. O'Brien, who built a yacht himself in 1820 and made a living by fishing and begging. When in 1821 King George IV left Dunleary, he saw the condition of O'Brien's boat and ordered that the boat be replaced by a better boat to be built in Portsmouth. And that boat was to be named the Royal Gift. So the boat was only 6 feet long. All the entry money from that regatta went by a curious arrangement to the Mendicity Institution founded in 1818 and still active today. It's interesting that there were no mention in any of the reports of Kingstown, or of the Royal Irish Yacht Club. Two unique regulations were in place. Owners could trim their ballast at their pleasure, and also they were required to fly a masthead flag 6 foot long by 4 foot deep. There were hundreds of spectators on the piers, both rich and poor, who had come to watch the spectacle. One of the poorest of the spectators, wearing about 3 halfpence worth of rags, as he watched the race, with one yacht from Cork, one from Dublin, and one from the north, owned by a Mr. McCracken. The fellow was heard to say in a strong Cork accent, "In troth, Mr. McCracken, you won't find it so easy to crack Paddy from Cork. For as far north as you are, och, didn't Cork always flog the world at floating and the like?" Other wits were heard to comment on how well the underwater part of the yachts had been prepared so well with soap and tallow to allow them to cut through the water more easily, that people were shouting, "That one is well lathered, she ought to be a close shaver." The Marquis of Anglesy's position as Lord Lieutenant in Ireland did not last for long. He fell out of favour with King George IV and with the Duke of Wellington and the Tory government in London over the support of Catholic emancipation. So he was recalled to London in January 1829 and replaced by the Duke of Northumberland. Did the Dublin Regatta become an annual event? There was a regatta in 1829 with Vice Admiral Sir Josiah Cogle, Captain of the Royal Navy, and Lieutenant Hutchinson of the Kingstown Harbour Master acting as regatta umpires. And despite dreadful weather and torrential rain, new prizes were presented by the new Lord Lieutenant, the Duke of Northumberland, and by Mr. Gresham, the hotelier. In 1830, King George IV died on the 26th of June, which meant there was no regatta that year. In 1831, the reports in the Dublin Morning Register noted that the inhabitants of Dublin proposed to give a most splendid regatta towards the end of June to compliment the Marquis of Anglesey on his return to Ireland. It is fully expected that His Most Gracious Majesty, the Sailor King, that is King William IV, will be pleased to present a most splendid challenge cup to be run for by vessels of all classes. And the explanation for this was that the new king and the new government in Westminster under Lord Grey, the Marquis of Anglesey, was reappointed as Lord Lieutenant in Ireland to replace the Duke of Northumberland in February 1830. The Dublin Evening Packet noted in September 1831, "We have much pleasure in stating that Princess Victoria, the Duchess of Kent," that is not Queen Victoria, but it's actually her mother, "she has signified the intention of presenting the Royal Irish Yacht Club with a challenge cup, similar to the gold one lately given by Her Royal Highness to the Royal Yacht Club." And the Royal Yacht Club was, of course, the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes. It was a handsome cup, designed with a silver cup or chalice, supported by 3 sailors, and a boat race is beautifully chased into the body of it, which is otherwise ornamented with sea wreaths and shells. That year, in 1831, the Liverpool boats, such as J.C. Shaw's 20-ton Dickie Sam, really dominated the racing. In October 1831, the Freeman's Journal reported that His Excellency the Marquis of Anglesey, the Lord Lieutenant, has accepted the office of Commodore of the Royal Irish Yacht Club for the ensuing year. In 1832, the Royal Irish Yacht Club moved away from Sackville Street or O'Connell Street and built or acquired a new clubhouse in Clarendon Buildings, which were on Great Brunswick Street in Dublin, which is what we know of as Pearse Street today. In 1832, that was 1832. Yes, a report in the Dublin Evening Packet and Correspondent described the clubhouse. It is ready for members and honorary members. It comprises club, bedrooms, billiard and smoking rooms, and wines and refreshments of the best description at first cost prices. We're not quite sure which building on the street it was. It was described as number 2 in Pettigrew and Alton's Almanac one year, and then the following year it was described as number 59. So you can see here on the screen, number 59, Monsignor Huguenin Metropolitan Gymnasium, Thomas Clarendon Riding School and Livery Stables, disposer of horses by private contract on commission, and the Royal Irish Yacht Club, all sharing the one premises at number 59. Now, the same report mentions that during the summer months, sailing club rooms will also be set apart for the accommodation of members and honorary members at the Royal Hotel Kingstown. That was Hayes Royal Hotel, was on the site of the current Royal Marine Hotel. It was described as being a large plain building, like a range of lofty private houses with pleasure grounds in front stretching down to the harbour. The Royal Marine Hotel, of course, was not built on that site until 1863. The primary object of the Royal Irish Yacht Club is sailing as a club. Yachts will rendezvous on the first and third Tuesdays of every month at 12 o'clock precisely in Kingstown Harbour. So I think we could say that cruising in company was the preferred form of club activity, using flag signals, followed by convivial dinners. So that's really what they were into, as opposed to racing matches. The Dublin Evening Packet and Correspondent noted in May 1832 the formation of this club and the admirable manner in which its proceedings have been conducted will render Kingstown particularly gay this season. The noble Commodore of the club, His Excellency the Marquis of Anglesey, has directed the club to be fitted up for his own reception by the 1st of June and proposes spending the summer on board his private yacht, the Pearl. Dublin Bay will present a splendid scene on the 25th of June, the day on which the regatta commences. All the yacht owners have signified their intention of being present. We're also glad to observe our fair countrywomen have come forward promptly with their subscriptions for a ladies' cup. In 1832, the Marquis of Anglesey, Commodore of the club, presented a magnificent club to be competed for at the regatta by all the yachts belonging to Irish yacht clubs. The trophy was worth £100 and was won by the Earl of Belfast's 162-ton Louisa. Henry Boylan, in his book White Sails Crowding, suggests that the Louisa was of similar displacement to the late lamented Asgard II, which had a gross displacement of 92 tons. Rowing continues to be an important part of boating in Kingstown, and the Dublin Regatta, at the Dublin Regatta, the Clonmel Herald reported on the 27th of June 1832 that a challenge had been sent by some members of the Royal Irish Yacht Club in Dublin, offering to pull against 4 or 6 gentlemen belonging to the Cork Harbour Club for 150 or £100. We don't know if anybody took up that challenge. The Belfast Newsletter reported in May 1833 that 2 British peers, John Dawson, 2nd Earl of Portarlington from Emo Court, and Charles Anderson Pelham, First Lord Yarborough, who was a founding member and the Commodore of the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes, had both been admitted as members of the Royal Irish Yacht Club. So you can see here what a yachtsman was expected to wear. He had a big cloak to keep the spray off him, and he had scarves and various other things, all to make him look smart. The Dublin Regatta of 1833 was the first regatta to be described as Kingstown Regatta. The beach was thronged with carriages and cars, etc., and a fashionable assemblage graced the opening of the aquatic sports. The race course was around the lightship, which took 4 hours to reach, so we must assume that the lightship was actually the Kish Light. During the regatta, an unfortunate accident occurred on board Her Majesty's cutter, the Kite. That was in 1833. During the firing of the 21-gun salute, when His Excellency Lord Lieutenant came ashore, the person whose duty was to fire off the gun applied the match before the arrangements were completed, by which 2 men who were employed driving home the charge lost their arms. The poor fellows immediately received surgical aid and were removed on shore. The Dublin Observer reported on the 21st of June, 1834 as follows: "We feel pleasure in laying before our readers the following letter from the Earl of Denbigh, the Queen's Chamberlain." So the letter goes as follows: Windsor Castle, 15th of June, 1834. And this came from Queen Adelaide. You may not ever have heard of Queen Adelaide. That was King William IV's wife. "Sir, I am honoured with the Queen's command to inform you that Her Majesty, Queen Adelaide, has very graciously pleased to accede to the request of the Royal Irish Yacht Club that the Ladies' Cup should be called after Her Majesty's name. I have the honour, sir, to be your obedient servant." So thereafter the cup was called the Queen Adelaide Cup. The Naval and Military Gazette and Weekly Chronicle of the United Services reported on the 12th of July, 1834, the Royal Irish Yacht Club will produce at the regatta in Dublin Bay on the 19th of July a boat not 30 feet long, to be pulled by 4 tenants of one of the members against any crew consisting of a like number in any boat not exceeding 30 feet long for 1 or 200 sovereigns, and the course to be from Kingstown Harbour round the Kish Light and back. On the 18th of July, the day before the Dublin Regatta, a dinner was held at the Anglesey Arms Hotel, after which the senior sailing steward, Captain Bushby of the Royal Navy, proposed toasts to the King, to the Queen, to the Duchess of Kent, the Lord Lieutenant, to the prosperity of Ireland, to the Army, toasts to the Navy, the Marquis of Donegal, Commodore of the Club, to Lord Yarborough and the Royal Yacht Squadron, to Sir Gore Booth, Vice Commodore of the Club, to the Duke of Portland and the Royal Northern Yacht Club, to Colonel Lloyd, Secretary of the Club, to the Marquis of Thomond and Cork Yacht Club, to Lord Dunraven and the Western Yacht Club of Ireland, to Captain Hutchinson, the Harbour Master, etc., etc. The party did not separate until a late hour. I do hope that they were sober enough to go yachting the following day. The Freeman's Journal reports on the 17th of July, 1834, that this day the regatta commences. There are 67 yachts entered for different cups. The challenge for any boat and crew to race around the Kish Light ship for £200 has not yet been accepted. The boat and crew have arrived. The boat in shape resembles a Norway skiff. It's 24 feet long, and the crew are 4 of the finest young-looking fellows we ever did see. In 1837, the Commodore of the Royal Irish was the Marquis of Donegal. Vice Commodore was Roger Gore Booth. And on Tuesday, the 20th of June, the regatta commenced with the Kingstown Challenge Cup, contest of Dublin Cup, and the 100 Guineas Gold Cup presented by the Railway Company. Due to the untimely death of King William IV, the regatta had to be suspended after only 2 days sailing. In 1838, the Royal Irish Yacht Club ran the Dublin Regatta in honour of their patroness, the Queen, which was, of course, at that stage, 18-year-old Queen Victoria. It was a 3-day regatta from Thursday, the 28th of June, the very day of her coronation. The prizes were most attractive. The Kingstown Challenge Cup worth 100 guineas for all the yachts belonging to the Royal Irish Yacht Clubs. The Royal Irish Yacht Club ran regattas from 1838 or till 1840, depending on which source you accept. James Lyle, writing in Hunt's Yachting Magazine of 1865, stated that the last regatta was 1838. The Royal Irish Yacht Club broke up in 1844. This disbursement took place at the Clarendon Buildings in Brunswick Street. Was the breakup over an argument about the relocating the club to Kingstown? No, it wasn't. The real problems were the high levels of debt caused by the failure to adequately fund the regattas, and we suspect that the Commodore and his ability to run his affairs may have had something to do with it. These debts caused the members to leave the club, or as you might say, rats leaving a sinking ship. So meanwhile, in 1836, the Pembroke Rowing Club was founded in Ringsend as a place where students of Dublin University and others could row on the Liffey and on the Dodder when the tide was in. The prize in these rowing matches is generally provided by the loser. The two clubs were joined in the 1840s by the Dublin University Rowing Club, and the two clubs formally merged in 1847. However, when Kingston Harbour was sufficiently complete, a group of members from the Pembroke Club set up a new club in Kingstown called the Kingstown Boat Club. The founders there were Charles Vernon, third son of the owner of Clontarf Castle. Other founders were Edward Hornby, who later became Secretary of the Office of Public Works, Thomas Hodder, and William Potts from Correen Castle in County Roscommon, who was a member of Athlone Yacht Club. All of these guys had more interest in rowing than they did have in yachting. Some of the men had been members of the old Royal Irish Yacht Club. Their plan was to build a clubhouse and slipway on the water's edge within the Royal Harbour in Kingstown, where, unlike Ringsend, neither the water nor the air were polluted. Unfortunately, in Kingstown, they met with opposition from the Commissioners of Public Works, who took the view, in relation to a private building on public land, that only a temporary building was acceptable, and a permanent building was completely out of the question. Despite this, the number of members in the club grew, not only with members from the Pembroke Rowing Club, but also some influential men from Protestant Dublin Merchant Society. In 1842, a site for the clubhouse had been agreed with Mr. Barry Gibbons, the engineer of the Commissioner of Public Works. In order to address the issue of building a permanent clubhouse, they invited all the harbour commissioners to become honorary members, and this did the trick. So in April 1842, John Skipton Mulvaney was appointed architect for a new permanent clubhouse. In May 1843, the new clubhouse was complete. It had Roman cement on the exterior, as this was cheaper than stone. The building was of modest size, with an entrance hall, a ballroom, dining room, committee room upstairs, and boat storage downstairs. As early as November that year, the club were talking to architects about an extension to the club. The fashionable George Papworth was appointed, and he prepared a drawing like this, doubling up the size of the original clubhouse. And as you can see in his original proposal, the front door was to be in the left-hand portico. There were no regattas held in 1841, 42, or 43. So the Kingstown Boat Club stepped into the breach and held its first regatta in 1844 as a two-day event. In 1845, the club gained a royal warrant and was thus renamed the Royal Kingstown Yacht Club. The Dublin Evening Packet and Correspondent in September 1846 reported that His Excellency the Lord Lieutenant was graciously pleased to present to this club a fine fat buck, accompanied by a most complimentary autographed letter in recognition of the courteous and cordial reception which His Excellency received on the occasion of his visit to Kingstown to inspect the fleet of revenue cruisers. A house dinner took place on Thursday when upwards of 40 gentlemen assembled. The Vice Commodore, Mr. Cooper, presided, and the health of the Lord Lieutenant and prosperity of Ireland was most enthusiastically toasted. By 1846, the extended clubhouse was complete. In 1848, that club changed its name to the Royal St. George's Club, Yacht Club, which name they retained until 1865, after which the club tweaked its name to the current title, Royal St. George Yacht Club. Now let's take a moment to look at Kingstown in 1843. There was substantial shipbuilding going on. You can see somewhere in the background, you can see just down there, you can see the Kingstown Boat Club, which had just been built. Perhaps it's not a coincidence that in 1845, 1 year after the demise of the old Royal Irish Yacht Club, a new club called the Hibernian Yacht Club was formed, located at the Northumberland Hotel, Berwick Place, behind the Custom House in Dublin. Their yachting matches and other activities took place in Dublin Bay, and their yachts were moored at Ringsend Gut, located at the confluence of the Liffey and the Dodder. Captain Sanford was the Commodore, and he owned a 10-ton yacht called the Sprite. He may have been a member of the Mount Sanford family from Castlerea in County Roscommon. The assistant Commodore was Mr. J. Kennedy, a wealthy Dublin merchant who owned a 7-ton cutter called the Star. The Freeman's Journal carried an advertisement in 21st of August 1845 to the effect that the Hibernian Yacht Club had now taken a house in Kingstown with facilities for its members, a coffee room and reading room furnished with newspapers, etc., at number 2 Susan Place, near the Anglesey Arms Hotel. Susan Place was a name for Crofton Avenue, which is where Downer sailmakers are now located. The Dublin Evening Post of July 1845 describes the Hibernian Club as being recently established with a view to encouraging Irish maritime interests. They ran a regatta in 1845 with prizes of £100. The rain fell in torrents. Pentoney O'Kelly acted as Commodore. Maurice O'Connell, MP, son of the Liberator, was the Vice Commodore, and the committee was John O'Connell, T. O'Mara, Walter Sweetman, Hugh Morgan Chute, Gregory Costigan, and John Flanagan. John O'Connell's yacht, the Star, anchored as flagship in the harbour, and Daniel O'Connell arrived at the 4 o'clock train and immediately was conveyed out to the Star in a yacht's gig. The other flagship was the Erne. In the racing, Mr. Newbury's Comet won the first race, and Mr. Skeffington's Phantom won the second race. Ocean Queen won the trawler race. The Kerry Evening Post was delighted to report on the 8th of October 1845 that this flag had been illegally flown from the Hibernian Yacht Club premises and on her yachts, which consisted of a green cross at the centre of Her Majesty's white ensign. The Hibernian Yacht Club morphed into what we know today as the Royal Irish Yacht Club, and a meeting was held possibly at Radley's Hotel, College Green, on the 23rd of July, 1846, with 28 men present. It suggests that these men may have applied to join the Kingstown Club, but may have been blackballed because they were either Quakers, dissenters, lawyers, or doctors. Daniel O'Connell was among the founder members. Subsequent meetings of the club were held at Gilbert's Royal Hotel, Westland Road. In August 1846, Prince Albert agreed to become joint patron of the club with his wife, Queen Victoria, and the club received its Admiralty warrant on the 10th of August that year. The warrant permitted the yachts of the club to fly the blue ensign of Her Majesty's fleet with a crown and harp in the fly thereof, and a blue burgee with the same device. Arthur Wills, Blundell, Sandys, Trumbull, Windsor Hill, 4th Marquess of Downshire, was the first Commodore, and he took a house at number 1 Charlemont Terrace, Kingstown, to be the temporary clubhouse while negotiations were commenced with the Board of Works to try and find a permanent site. By 16th of October 1846, a letter was received from the Admiralty granting a site and permission to erect a clubhouse and wharf, subject to the same conditions which had proved to be problematic to the Kingstown Yacht Club. Provided that whenever public service requires it, the government may resume at short service the possession of the ground without compensation. The club members had been smart. They already asked the architect, John Mulvaney, to prepare drawings, which were quickly approved by the club committee. So had this new club been given approval to build a lovely clubhouse. On the 9th of November 1846, the Commissioners of Public Works, who had not been involved in any discussions on the siting of the clubhouse, were somewhat offended to be excluded from negotiations. So they wrote to the club asking for a copy of the Admiralty letter and confirming that the Admiralty sanction is only permissive and conveys no authority to the Commissioners to grant the ground sought, and went on to state that it is their duty to advise the Lords of the Treasury not to sanction any building of a private nature until we can ascertain what may be required for the public service. By March 1847, the famine in Ireland was causing grief, pain, and hardship throughout the country, including Kingstown and including the lands around Neenah and Athlone. But some people, including the Lord Lieutenant, had other things on their mind. The site for a gentleman's yacht club. The harbour had been vested in the Lord Lieutenant and the harbour commissioners. The Earl of Clarendon, who was the Lord Lieutenant in 1847, was keen to get the matter off his desk as quickly as he could. So eventually in December 1847, the matter was resolved and the club was granted the use of a site which was approved by the engineer Barry Gibbons. It was at that stage that the Lord Lieutenant, the Earl of Clarendon, transmitted a communication to the Secretary that Her Majesty had graciously pleased to grant a cup to be styled Her Majesty's Plate, to be sailed annually in Kingstown. But Lord Clarendon suggested that the Royal St. George and the Royal Irish should compete for it on alternate years. They agreed to this and decided to toss a coin to see which club should compete for it first. The coin was tossed in the Hayes Hotel and the Royal St. George won. The following communication in 1847 of Sir F. Stoven from Her Majesty to Henry Scoville, Honorary Secretary of the Royal Irish Yacht Club. We have pleasure to acquaint you for the information of the members of the Royal Irish Yacht Squadron that the congratulatory address of those gentlemen to the Queen, enclosed in your letter of the 19th of April, was duly conveyed to Her Majesty. And in reply, I am commanded by Her Majesty to communicate the Queen's most gracious acquiescence to their request of considering Her Majesty as a patroness of the institution. Your most obedient servant, Frederick Stoven. It was agreed that a regatta to be conducted with more than usual interest should take place in honour of Her Majesty's coronation and commence on the 28th of June. Meanwhile, a letter to builders in the Freeman's Journal read as follows. Proposal will be received for the erection of a clubhouse and offices at Kingstown for the Royal Irish Yacht Club. Plans to be seen at the offices of John S. Mulvaney, Esquire, architect. And what was his address? Great Brunswick Street. And you can see at the bottom that the address of the Royal Irish Yacht Club at that time was Temporary Rooms, the Anglesey Arms Hotel. We do note that the clubhouse was built and completed by April 1851, and the club did go on to prosper. Now, we must not forget some of the later clubs. The Irish Model Yacht Club was founded in 19th of March 1857 at a meeting in Gilbert's Hotel, Westland Row, under the chairmanship of Mr. William Cooper. The purpose of that club was to encourage amateur sailing. Prior to that time, most yachts had one amateur on board who was the owner. If he trusted his own ability, he steered, but all the hard work on the sails was done by paid employees. From 1864, the Irish Model Yacht Club was renamed the Prince Alfred Yacht Club. From 1866, they organised offshore races, which was an innovation at the time. They were the first club to organise single or double-handed yacht races. The club was a prime mover behind the formation of the world's first National Yacht Racing Association with standardised rules, including flying starts. In 1871, the Commodore, the Duke of Edinburgh, promoted the club to being called the Royal Alfred Yacht Club. It's not for me to talk about this club as Hal Siskett, the man who knows all that there is to be known. So in conclusion, we have had many different clubs in Dublin and in Kingstown and Dunleary. That it's quite easy to be confused as to which club was which. In some instances, members left one club and formed another. Some clubs just changed their name in order to transform themselves into something different. However, at the end of the day, it's the humans who feel the need to socialize with like-minded people that is the essence of all yacht clubs. Thank you very much.